Hey, what's up, y'all? At the beginning of this month, I ranked all of the Star Wars films from the worst to the best, and it got me thinking. There's a lot of movies that I watch every month that I just never get around to reviewing, either because it's an older movie, I simply just didn't have that much to say about it, or they just didn't really fit a particular theme. So, rather than letting all these films go to waste, at the end of each month, I'll just talk about what all I saw this month. Some films I have a lot to say, and some I might just have a few sentences. But anyway, let's get started. On May 2nd, I watched The Lighthouse, directed by Robert Eggers. And this is undoubtedly the most unique film I have watched in a long time. The whole film is shot in black and white with a square-shaped aspect ratio, which evokes the feeling that you're watching an old photo come to life. There are even little moments in which the two leads look directly into the camera, like they really are posing for a photo. Willem Dafoe brings his A-game, which is to be expected as he's proven himself time and time again. But the performance that really blew me away was Robert Pattinson's. He has come a long way from the guy from Twilight to a guy that has really proven his skill first in 2017's Good Time, and now this in Lighthouse. Pattinson brings to life the story of a man who goes completely insane from being stuck in this lighthouse with an old man, and the two display such a wide array of emotions that come through crystal clear despite the unconventional shooting methods. If you're looking for a creepy movie akin to The Shining that leaves you with more questions than answers, this is the film for you. On May 12th, I watched WALL-E and Up because I plan on doing a Pixar ranking in the near future. With this viewing, I like WALL-E a lot more than I remember, and I think a lot of that comes with age. It's one of the more subtle Pixar movies, so there were a lot of nuances that I appreciate a lot more that I might have overlooked when I was a kid. The only thing I'm not too crazy about is they use live-action actors in certain scenes. It's not enough to ruin the movie, but it does take me out for a bit. And then there's Up, and it's one of those movies that I have a love-hate relationship with. On one hand, the beginning makes me weep like a newborn, especially now that I have a wife and can project my own personal experience onto that scene. On the other, one scene doesn't make an entire movie, and the entire middle act is just boring in comparison to everything else. It sticks the landing in the end by bookending very nicely things that were set up in the beginning. It's just the road from point A to point B can be exhausting. On May 18th, I watched School of Rock for the first time since I was 10, and honestly, it was way better than I expected for a movie that I haven't watched in 15 years. You can dismiss this film as a silly Jack Black movie, and that's fine, but I have a lot of respect for the level of understanding this director has on what goes on in the music-making process. One scene in particular has Jack Black arranging the students into their respective sections, and it's all done through one long take, creating this sort of build-up until they become one cohesive unit. It was a technical achievement that I wasn't expecting in School of Rock of all films. And speaking of music, not only does it have a great soundtrack full of licensed music, but it even has its own original music that the child actors perform at the very end of the film. It's a movie that's way better than it needs to be, which is what still makes it a classic 20 years later. On May 20th, I caught Aquaman for the first time. I never really avoided this movie as much as something would always get in the way. And while the film is by no means perfect, this was, for many, the movie to put the DCEU back on track, and therefore garnered a fairly warm reception in its initial release. While the film takes several steps in the right direction, especially in its use of color, there's still a lot of residual Zack Snyder-y elements, especially when they do flashback scenes that just take the viewer out of the experience for a few moments. It's visually stunning, but the plot has too much stop and go and lacks a clear direction on where the story is headed. On May 22nd, my wife showed me Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan, and just to put my own personal bias on the table, I'm not much of a Star Trek guy, so it was difficult for me to feel too invested in this film. With that being said, Ricardo Montalban as Khan is incredible and has a presence that just commands respect wherever he goes. Certainly one of the best sci-fi villains I have seen in a long time. Then for the last couple of days, I just compulsively devoured movie after movie. It was a little disturbing. On the 30th/31st, I watched the 1977 adaptation of The Hobbit, Advantageous, Hunt for the Wilder People, and Uncut Gems. Truth be told, the only reason I watched The Hobbit was because there was one episode of South Park involving a certain gerbil that mimicked The Hobbit's animation style, and curiosity got the best of me. It's fine. It's not the most horrendous thing I've ever seen, it's just kind of boring. It's got cool music, and it definitely captures the fairy tale aspect of The Hobbit a lot better than the Percy Jackson version did. Again, at least I only had to sit through one movie instead of three. Then you got Advantageous, which is actually a film I had to watch for a summer class I'm taking, and this film is rife with ideas that are perfect for writing an essay for film class. But that doesn't mean it's good. This film clearly has a message about how we view beauty and the kinds of standards we as a society push upon women. The problem, though, is that there are times where the characters literally tell you what the movie is all about. I can't remember exactly what the daughter says, but there's a scene where she says something that was clearly written by a screenwriter and not a child. It was something along the lines of like, "But Mom, why would you want to change yourself to meet society's expectations?" And you're just like, yeah, there's no way she said that. And then I caught Hunt for the Wilder People, directed by Taika Waititi. Before viewing this, the only films by Waititi that I've seen are Thor Ragnarok and Jojo Rabbit. And to be honest, I was convinced that because of his work with Disney, his style has probably shifted since then. But to be honest, not really. It still has that Taika Waititi flavor that I've come to know from the more recent films. Sure, the budget for Hunt for the Wilder People is much smaller, but it still has the quirky characteristics that you see from what Taika Waititi to this day, even in franchise films. One big through line that I've noticed with Hunt for the Wilder People and Thor Ragnarok and Jojo Rabbit is finding the humor and beauty in the awkward moments. Most directors would gloss over the awkward moments, yet Waititi puts extra emphasis on these and creates an environment that is more than just relatable. It's human. And finally, on May 31st, I watched Uncut Gems per its recent inclusion into Netflix's library. Granted, if you're from the UK, you got to see this back in January, but here in the US, we had to wait until May to watch it. This movie is hands down Adam Sandler's best performance yet. He does this by doing something he hasn't done in years. Try. For the past 10 years or so, Sandler has kind of been on autopilot, cranking out Netflix originals with his buddies that are essentially just paid vacations. But with this, you see that he is putting in an effort to make a movie, and I think the director chose the perfect actor for this role, as the character Sandler plays is a pretty unlikable individual, and I think Sandler's natural likability makes him a little bit more, relatable. And you have to, because this character is an absolute scumbag. He lies, he cheats on his wife, he spends money that he doesn't have, and he even plays with other people's money and gambles them. This film is more than just a great performance from Sandler. This movie is intense. The character of Howard Ratner is a person who is in debt with several dangerous individuals and is constantly seen playing with other people's money and having to drive from location to location just to get ahead. And throughout the entire film, he is just spinning his wheels. And even whenever you think that he does get a yard ahead, he does something to dig himself into a deeper hole, because at the end of the day, he's addicted to the rush. This level of intensity is amplified by the camera work and the editing. The camera is often handheld, which makes you feel like you're stuck there with them, and typically employs long takes, which rob the audience of the ability to emotionally distance oneself from the film. You are stuck with Sandler on this wild and dangerous ride from start to finish. Never has a movie made me feel this stressed and entertained at the same time. And that's all the movies that I have for this month. I think I like this format a lot. It's a nice middle ground because I don't feel like I have to make each review a certain amount of words or pages. I could just kind of go with the flow and talk about whatever is important to me. But anyway, that's the end of this podcast. I'm Higgs, this has been my flick, and thanks for listening.